And I'm live, apparently. Let me put the camera down. Maybe over there so it won't be hanging off. Hey there. Welcome to YouTube Live. My mask. Put that in here. Let me get back here. Give me a few minutes to set up here. That's nice. Okay. We have about 2 minutes to start time. Oh, there it is. So if I can open it up. Okay, how do I do that? There it is. Okay, there's a way to pop the chat out, I think. Oh, I gotta share it first. Share, I don't wanna share. Nope, I wanna share there. I'll share on Twitter. Let's see. And there it goes. How fun. Okay, well, it is 6:30, right on the spot. Let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Good morning. My name is Kurt. I am the author of Going Alone. Hold on, let me pop this chat out. That way I won't have to look at myself. Pop out chat. There we go. There we go. My name's Kurt. I'm the guy behind the softypapa channel. And I'm the author of a book called Going Alone. Going Alone was written as a result and consequence, really, of my time in the California desert, biding my time while waiting for my family to join me after we decided to move back to America from our life in Japan. And while out there in the desert, I encountered a nothing and decided to write about that nothing and the consequence that that had on my life and the resulting need to make something to make something worthwhile, a strategy or a set of values to make life worthwhile, if indeed it appears that we are surrounded by nothing and all of God is one another. I can see comments. There's Aaron. Hi, good morning, Aaron. Good morning to you. So, I didn't really set out to do that. That wasn't really what I did. But when I got out there into the desert, into the deep desert, and kept persistently encountering the nothing, I decided then, and I looked around, and I realized that we just have one another. It's a strange thing, that this idea of going alone, leading us to society, leading us to the importance of family and connection and friends and the warm embrace of one another. But as a result of that, I needed some system to structure my life in that. Before that, I was kind of just wandering aimlessly without really any particular values of my own, just kind of hijacking the values of my society. And when I began to catalog these things, putting together what I call the good life, it turned out to be a very worthwhile endeavor, especially as I reflected on these every day, and they became more and more part of the man I wanted to become. Less cognitive and more instinctual. And then I began to recognize that there was some alignment going on here with principles that I had borrowed from others, particularly from the Stoics. So there's a great a strong Stoic theme in my writing, and in my life, in fact, as well. So anyway, today I'm going to read to you. I read my chapters. I'm going to read from Going Alone, and I do this in two ways. I either read this outright, like out in the desert, and then I upload those, and there's like audio versions. And then sometimes I read it like this, in this live setting. I do this once a month. Every month, last Sunday of every month, I'll read part of this. I won't read the whole chapter, just a little bit, because I need to get back to my family. It's 6:34, and I plan to have breakfast with my family by hopefully 7:30. So I'll do this for a little while. If you have any questions, feel free to answer. I also, something I do differently that I don't typically do in the readings out in the desert, is I'll stop and talk a little bit about things. So, by the way, this is the new version. This is the new cover of the book. It's changed a lot since I first started out. It's amazing how much work editing is. So today I'm going to read The Anxiety Hike. The Anxiety Hike is really the heart of the book. The Anxiety Hike is where if the beginning of the book lays out the challenge, the Anxiety Hike is the venue for sharing the experience of discovering the Great Indifference. And I wrote this chapter literally to describe to you how to retrace my steps in the desert, if you wanted to. But I did it in such a way as to be very indistinct, because if you were to follow my path exactly, it would ruin the entire effect. It's like you need to go on your own. You need to go alone. But I'll give you a rough guide. Hopefully, if you follow my guide here, you'll get lost along the way, and then you'll wind up seeing the nothing as I saw it, which will be invisible to you if you recognize that you're following my footsteps. So here we are, Going Alone. The Anxiety Hike. As a lot of my chapters do, I open with a poem, or not a poem, a quote. The Anxiety Hike. Discovering the Great Indifference. Or will he, after the tomb-like seclusion of the past day and night, go forth a humbled and repentant man, sorrowful, gentle, seeking no profit, shrinking from worldly honor, hardly daring to love God, but bold to love his fellow man, and to do him what good he may. Nathaniel Hawthorne. That's a quote from the House of Seven Gables, one of my favorite books by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And I like the way that describes the man that experiences a trial of a day and a night, and then going forth back into the world in a very humbled nature, and yet looking to love his fellow man and woman. That doesn't sound right. You get what I mean, right? So, through some trial, coming out the other side, not despondent or giving up or in despair, but humbled and ready to be social. That's the experience of the Anxiety Hike, is to go into the wilderness alone, to be humbled by the experience of what isn't out there, and then to the discovery, the apparent nature, the apparent nothingness, although it is a nothing, the emptiness, and then to come back wanting to be one of us again. And then each of these has those little sections. Okay, so in the Anxiety Hike chapter, it's broken down into sections with a title. So the first is Sharing the Way, and then from there it goes to Hike Stats, and then Going Alone Proper. Let's go. Settle into this a little bit. Oh, and someone just went over to the website from Dodge. NE. Well, what's NE? What state is that? Well, welcome to the website. Sharing the Way. I'm going to tell you now how to get to a place where I've reliably encountered the Great Indifference, though I suspect the very telling may spoil the way. If you follow my path, then you'll likely find nothing but sand and waste and heat, all the composite bits of what you're after, without the substance of what's not really there. My guidance is the problem. The fact that you've followed my words to a place which I found while alone and, in a sense, lost. You may need those alone and lost bits yourself before you can find the indifference. Not to be lost in fact, but instead to be somewhat indeterminate in your navigation and knowingly off course in your movement. So doesn't that just kind of basically say what I said just a moment ago? You know, about I'm trying to give you a rough guide to a way to become lost, safely lost, relatively safely lost. Watch out for the heat. Watch out. That desert killer out there, even if you can still see Siberia, even if you can still see the railroad, if you get out too far and the heat catches you, the desert killer catches you, then I'm afraid there's no hope. When you've reached the point where you've satisfied your curiosity about the route I once took, then ask yourself if you're ready to step off the unseen marks of my past trespass, to embark along new lines toward your own solitary waste and desolation. If ready, then put aside my maps and guidance. Stuff these deep into your pack or tear them up perhaps. But do this only if you've a mind to crush the empty promise of discovering anything of real value by retracing my footsteps exactly. So prepared, step now onto the soft sand or across the hard and slippery granite. Begin walking where your feet will go. Do you have your GPS life beacon? Is it charged, armed, and ready to save your life? If not, are you willing to gamble hard and deep with your own soulless mortality for the chance to meet what isn't there in the deep wastes? If so, then you don't need my words any longer. Go and die today in the face of what is not, to continue on and better as part of what really is. Now, of course, you don't have to go to Siberia Ghost Town and embark off into the north, into the desert to discover this. All you need is the attitude and the inclination and the solitude, the privacy, the fact of being alone, to go into just about any wilderness to get a sense of this. But I do recommend a desert for best results. I've done this many, many times, of course, in Japan, and I can't think of a single time that I reliably sensed or encountered that thing that I call the Great Indifference in Japan. And it was the fact of the fecundity of nature, the crash and gurgle of life, the cacophony of life all about me, the cicadas, the monkeys, the birds, the whir of insects, the fall of water, water not being life itself, but so suggestive of the life all around me. All of that successfully masked what I found or I didn't find in the desert. But I remember from the earliest days of my young adulthood, going into the desert alone, the same desert, and sensing the emptiness out there, scaring the crap out of me, frankly, not knowing what it was. And it really took, 3 or 4 decades to eventually begin to make some sense of that. When I talk here about dying, go now and die, is go and die today in the face of what is not. Of course, I'm not referring to death. I'm referring to the death of the expectation of something more, the death of the thoughts of mortality, and the death of oversight that we might be watched over and guided and protected by some universal mind or God. When that fantasy dies away, and we're left with the strict sense of the emptiness of the universe, the old greater universe, boy, that's when, as in Hawthorne's words earlier, where we become humbled to the state of almost nearly crawling back to our society, to want to do good, to be social, to be one with others, to the end of our days. Hike stats. Distance, 5 miles round trip approximate. Return is via a different route. Actual mileage may vary greatly depending on how closely you fail in following my course and how successful you are in losing the way. Good luck. It's not hard to do. It's just, it kind of scares me. It kind of scares me, the idea of anybody actually ever doing that, of actually trying to retrace this. You know, I didn't really write this for you to actually do this. I wrote it so that you could vicariously experience it in a way. But it would be it's quite a thought for somebody to actually go out there, park their vehicle at Siberia, and head off into the desert to try with this book. You know, okay, so I'm going to go get that way. You know? It makes me nervous because it's dangerous, and I don't want anybody to die pursuing a nothing. I shouldn't laugh. Trail quality. There is no trail here, though there are many potential paths of wildness. The terrain is mostly flat, with everything rising on a slight incline south to north. The landscape is uneven, with hard and slippery granite and rhyolite slopes, periodic sandy flash flood arroyo and gullies, and several steep black volcanic domes. There is little or no shade. You will be utterly exposed and utterly alone. For that matter, and for our purpose, the trail quality here then can perhaps be honestly described as perfect. Best time to go, November through April. Avoid summer months unless you're truly ready to meet the desert killer. I would say spend that, well, I'll say this elsewhere, but watch out even in May. Watch out even in October. The killer can show up all of a sudden. Dangers. There are many. Heat, exposure, snakes, spiders, rugged terrain, open mines, no connectivity, and no help. Also, there is no love or caring here. Beware, these may follow you back. That's a very serious warning, right? My reaction to the encountering the Great Indifference was, as Hawthorne described, a yearning for society, a yearning to be a part of what I did know was, where I did know that love and fraternity existed. I imagined that another option might be despair or nihilism. No, nihilism's not the word. I am a nihilist, but I'm a positive nihilist. I'm a nihilist who wants to pursue virtue and make the best of this meager life that I've got and the time that I've got, despite the fact that the universe doesn't give a damn. But it's possible there's another, you can go the other way with nihilism, which is despair and giving up and, maybe even suicide. Watch out for that. That's a danger. Reasons to go. Solitude, history, natural beauty, to encounter the Great Indifference, to lose so much you never knew you didn't need. Indifference rating. High chance of encounter, but only if you go alone. I'm probably not going to read straight through this whole chapter. I'm going to skip ahead. I'm going to read a little bit more. The next section is called, Why Did I Come to This Place? It's not a chapter, it's just a section. I might read that and then I might skip ahead, because after that, there's a long trek through the tongues of rock. It's kind of like it's like the marching trudge through the desert, where I think I want to get to the morrow of this thing. Let's read this piece though. Why did I come to this place? I'm haunted by something which does not exist. Can you guess what that is? Something which doesn't drift across the desert sands or linger in the cold night air, nor touch my heart, nor press my words. Still the words do come, arising from my own forceful optimism. Maybe that's the thing that saved me all this time, is my optimism. It is forceful. It is indomitable. Drawn along in their emergence by the vacuum pole of a landscape which does not and cannot care. The desert is indifferent to my ideas, my positions, my feelings, and even my life. Though it can and will consume these, not through any action or intent on the part of nature, but by way of the landscape's withering neglect and disregard, and the resulting loneliness and disconnect, which is the bittersweet end I always seek and discover in such places. Yeah, that's exactly it. I stopped in mid-sentence. That's exactly it. That's the desert is indifferent to my ideas, my positions, my feelings, though it can and will consume these, though not through any action or intent or part on the part of nature. So nature has no intent to kill me or to humble me, but by way of the landscape's withering neglect and disregard. But by the very emptiness, the very lack of caring out there has that. It's almost a desiccating effect, desiccating upon this, for lack of a better term. I'm going to use the colloquial term, spirit, desiccation of the spirit. I don't like the way that sounds, but it captures the idea. It kind of like it's almost evaporating away whatever is vital within through the recognition of that, almost to use that word again, that vacuum pull of nature. It's a pull that gives nothing back, really. That's why we need one another. So I stop mid-sentence. As well as the very torment, even my bones must painlessly endure as they dry, bleach, and crack to sand under the inferno sun, before desert winds then scatter what's left of me to oblivion. Writer shouldn't say this, but I was particularly proud of that long sentence. I think that captured very well the experience of pushing out into the desert, feeling the blaze of heat, the dryness in the air, the silence, the fact of being alone, and resolving to step forward, knowing that every step forward into the desert, I would take something of me, and I would return as less. Man, but how much more? I'm writing another book now. It's the sequel to Going Alone. It's called The Good Life, where I enumerate and discuss the 30 objectives and principles, which I relate briefly in this book. And there's one of them called, I call it the shadow dividend, and it's the dividend of temperance. Is that it? I can't quite remember. But it's a new idea. It's not a principle in its own right, but it's an adjunct to one of the other principles. And the shadow dividend is what comes when we lose. It's the dividend of loss. It's the exfoliation of what we have but no longer need. I made a video out in the mountains in Japan a long time ago. I remember standing by a stream. It's out there somewhere on the Softypapa channel. And I held up a rock, and I was talking about the rock tumbling down through the stream, wearing away slowly, the bits and pieces dropping off, and how I felt like that was the process of maturation, especially through trial, as the unnecessary bits of ourselves wear away. And the shadow, now it's got a label. I call it the shadow dividend. And that sentence right there describes that process through the anxiety hike, through going out into the desert alone. A type of anxious motivation comes to me whenever I tread alone into a place which I sense is not just indifferent to my life and death, but incapable of even giving a damn about either. With some mischief, I call this self-inspiration my muse, and reckon it as she. Such poetic license. I do worry that I'm only confusing matters by not speaking plainly that my muse does not really exist. She's only a thing of my mind, a circumstance of place and time, a past experience and disposition and bias and want. Oh, someone just went to the website from Munich, Germany. Hello from Munich, Germany. So that's an important piece as well in the story, is the muse. Now, of course, the muse, I talk about the muse. I use that poetic term. basically to describe the inspiration that comes when the calculus of chemicals in my mind arrange themselves into such a way as to produce something that seems like it's worth writing down. That's the muse. And I get that more often out in the desert or adventuring than anywhere else. So really when I'm describing there as going out into the desert, bringing my muse with me, she is safe to bring with me because she's not real. You can bring as many imaginary characters with you as you want into the desert, that's fine. You can see the Great Indifference despite the cacophony of their non-existent comforts. Going alone is the next chapter here, next section. The words I seek and which I attribute to my muse come, in fact, from my own liberated senses. The experience is like the anxious freedom a child knows when they go past the limits prescribed by caring adults, to take thrilling risks which yield secret and suspect reward, and hold unknown and unforeseen consequences. The words which arrive to me in this state have more in common with fearful, mad laughter than sane and sober sagacity. Perhaps this is the reason I must always go alone, for to share this experience with another must surely break the spell of relentless risk and introspection. And perhaps this fact can also explain a little why I sometimes fail at my effort to enter the deep desert alone, and instead turn back for home, citing my family and responsibility and other worldly reasons to give up. But hope is not lost for those who aim to find more than just my footsteps. All that is needed to go beyond my path is to simply not stop looking, to continue past the lines I've marked with my words, to trespass the unknown and uncertain, to be ready to fail, ready to become lost, ready to never come back, and most importantly, be ready to go alone. Okay, now from there, I get into the next piece is when to go and where, when to go and what to expect, and then arrival and campsite. And then I talk about setting out, crossing the railroad, under the bridge, of course, and then setting off past the berm into the desert, and then a long hike through the tongues of rock, which is more of a, it's funny how I wrote that. It's very similar to the real experience. That particular section is a difficult section perhaps to read because I deal a lot with geology in there. And someone just popped in at the website from the United Kingdom. Welcome. That was a difficult, it's trudging, it's geology, it's observation, it's facts, it's desert patina, it's rocks in situ and describing them. And in a way that's good because that is a long trudging hike through the desert. It's really the hard work of getting to the place where the good stuff happens. And you have to have that trudging hike to gain the distance from civilization, to wear yourself out a little bit, and to get far enough away that you begin to realize you're at risk and that there's danger. And now what? So I'm slowly skipping ahead as I'm talking here, getting to Windy Ridge. That's the one I'm going to read now. Windy Ridge is, you've gone through that long hike, you've trudged through the desert, you've lost sight of, you're headed towards this thing called Black Mountain. You've lost sight of Black Mountain, you've regained sight of Black Mountain, you've seen the geology, you've gone through the Siberia Wash, and now you've reached the foot of Black Mountain, which is really a Black Mountain. And it was the reason that I first came out here, because I found it on Google Earth and I wanted to check out what appeared to be a line across the edge, which I think I later figured out is an animal track, although what animal I can't imagine. Anyway, now you've reached Windy Ridge and you've got to scramble up the rocks, and you get to this one point thing that juts out from it. It's like a ledge that juts out from the mountain. The mountain's very steep. And you've climbed up this top to this little saddle at the top. You're not even near the top. I mean, the mountain is big. And they're at this ridge, and then you're going to go out to the edge of the ridge and stand. And what you see beyond back there, you're looking back towards Siberia, all those way across that sea of desert. And there's a wind blowing. It's battering you back and forth. And you're all alone. and you look down at the rocky thing escarpment you just climbed, and behind you at the ominous black mountain behind, and then to the right and over, and the thing that I call the Sandman's bed, it's out there. And that's when it's like, holy crap, that's when the greatest chance of catching sight of, not necessarily, if not the great indifference, at least the anxiety. This is where the anxiety from the anxiety hike comes. The anxiety of the recognition of vulnerability, of mortality. It takes a little further into the hike before you really see the great indifference. And I'll get to that in just a second. So let's talk about Windy Ridge, that point up there at the edge. Windy Ridge. About halfway up the small canyon, turn right and begin climbing carefully up the side towards the ridge above. About halfway up the side, stop and look around. If you're lucky and in the right place, you might make out the very faint outline of an animal trail where it crosses the hillside. I discovered this animal trail through the study of satellite imagery, and it was curiosity about the trail which first led me here. Go to the trail, and then follow it towards Black Mountain until you reach the looming flank of that ominous peak. Now that you have reached the mountain, look up. Impressive, huh? When I reached this same point, I quickly gave up any idea of climbing Black Mountain. There was simply something about the steepness of the sides, the fact that I was alone, the strong wind, the startling sunlight, and the poor condition of my body, which was already protesting the hike with fatigue and the whispered voice of caution, which together suggested I was done with this upward advance, at least for today. For the record, I have since returned and climbed Black Mountain. So now we've kind of reached that, we've gone along the animal trail, we've reached kind of that ridge, looking at Black Mountain behind, and like, no, hell no, I'm not going up there. I'm too tired, I'm weak, I'm old, I'm scared. Maybe I'll just take a walk out on this little ridge. Climb now along the very edge of Black Mountain, where it meets the little canyon, and up to the ridge which extends out from the side of the mountain. Walk out on the ridge and find a nice spot to sit, to look back in the direction of Siberia. Black Mountain is now looming directly behind you, small canyons falling away on your either side. Looking left, you can see the Watcher upon his distant perch, watching you still. The Watcher is simply a cluster of rocks I talked about a little earlier in this chapter that appear to be a human watching you walk across the desert. But it's just a mining cairn put there decades, maybe more than a century ago, by a prospector who thought there might be likely minerals in that mountain. To the right, the second wash you cross disappears soon around a bend and into the Badlands to the north, to the place you are headed next. In there can be found the Sandman's bed. If you're lucky, the wind is now blowing hard perhaps. Looking far directly ahead, you can see many miles to Siberia and the distant Bolivian mountains beyond. So far, so impossibly far. Okay, here it is. This is the moment of anxiety in the anxiety hike. You're out on that edge, on that ledge, falling to the left, falling to the right, falling in front of you. Behind you, the ominous peak of Black Mountain, too intimidating to climb. Before you, miles and miles of empty desert, ridges up and down. You can see Siberia, ghost town in the distance. Oh my God, is it really that far away? Am I really here by myself? Now, bear in mind, the first time I ever went here, nobody knew where I was. I had no utility beacon. I had nothing. I was really on my own. If something had happened to me, I would not have been found. And that is a piece of this experience that might have been necessary for this to happen. If I'd had my set emergency beacon at that point, I don't know if I would have had this experience that I'm about to relate in this next little paragraph right here. This was key. This is the anxiety piece. And I'm going to finish, after I read this one piece, then I'm going to finish with a little bit. We're going to go out into the Sandman's bed. And then I'll finish there for the day and go have breakfast with my family. But let's read this part. And then the next. So you're sitting on the rock, looking out, the Black Mountain behind you, steep sides on either side, some impossible wilderness to the right, Siberia deep, deep, far away, the wind blowing, it's strong enough up there, it kind of blows you around, and here you go. This is the point when the fear first struck me on this hike. A real anxiety rising from the immensity of the vista before me, the solitude, the uncaring wind, my own growing sense of my body's failing functions and frail durability. How easy it would be to stumble and twist a leg on descent from this place. Somewhere where nobody knows where I am, someplace I'd not likely ever be found. Sure, somebody could find my motorcycle back at Siberia, but what could lead them here to me across such trackless desert, with so many other places to look? Yes, here I am so clearly vulnerable and weak and getting old, and so plainly mortal. The indifference becomes apparent at this point, especially when I look over my right shoulder at the Badlands to the north, towards the Sandman's bed, which is my next destination. Again, for the record, the first time I came here, I did not have my GPS rescue device, and no one knew where I was. I was truly, utterly alone and beyond help. Though I hesitate to say so, this factor may be important to the quality of the experience which I'm attempting to relate. Though if anyone asks, you didn't hear that from me. I was really shooken up by that experience. I'm surprised that I didn't go back. I think I went a little further because I was trying to push through the anxiety. But I think if I hadn't gone further into the Sandman's bed, I might have returned back home just shaken from the idea of adventure and maybe thought, I don't want to do this anymore. It's really a good thing that I went on a little further. And this is the last bit that I'll read. It's about 3.5 pages. So it is a little bit long. It's the Sandman's bed. And it was the part that sealed the deal for me. It was the part that caused me to recognize the Great Indifference. Although I hadn't yet given it a name. The Sandman's bed. Look behind you from Windy Ridge. If you came here alone, could you climb to the top of that black mountain at your back? The challenge proved too much for me, and I found myself dismissing the thought outright with vehemence, with such conviction that I was startled by my own eagerness almost to give up. How could this be, as climbing Black Mountain was the very reason I'd come here? Now all I could think to do was retreat, and I couldn't escape fast enough. If your resolve is greater than mine, then climb Black Mountain, and hazard a glimpse of deeper indifference than my courage or resolve could then muster. When you're done, or if, like me, you give up, then make your way carefully back down the side of Windy Ridge, the way you arrived. Though don't go back along the animal trail, and instead simply go directly to the bottom of the little canyon and then up the other side. Below you now are the Badlands. Make your way carefully down, and then skirt east along the base of Black Mountain until you can see another black volcano in the far distance to the east. Turn now to the north and move straight into the Badlands. Note how the wind suddenly stops here. Where did this silence come from? And suddenly the fear is gone, or nearly gone. Maybe it will soon be replaced by something else. I can't emphasize enough how significant the sudden cessation of wind was in that. After coming off the ridge, being blown about, it was the wind that really heightened the anxiety. Something about that, maybe because it was blowing me deeper into the desert. It was blowing away from Siberia towards me and blowing in my face. It was kind of like a force pushing me back. But as soon as I got back down and I was going around Black Mountain, and I went up a little side and then down again, and the wind just stopped. Dead silence. Dead stillness. That dead air. It was almost like a vacuum. You know, have you ever had when your ears pop in reverse, right? Because the suction pulls it out. And even though that didn't happen, it had that effect on my mind of suddenly relief from whatever it was causing the anxiety. And the anxiety did drop away. But it's telling that I suggested that maybe it will soon be replaced by something else, and it was. Wander a bit to the north wander a bit to the north into the hard and irregular landscape here. Attempt to get lost a little and perhaps forget the reason you came. It's really easy to get lost here. Not lost in fact, but lost in the better sense. Within a few minutes, the land will dip down and to the left at what is the start of a small drainage. Go down into that drainage and follow it as the water would flow, back in the direction of Siberia. You've just passed the furthest point of this journey, and you will now be making a roundabout return to Siberia, following a new route back in the worthy tradition of Thoreau. It's hard for me to describe this, but when you come across around the edge of the mountain, and you'll be setting out into this Badlands, it'll be very apparent to you what the Badlands are. It's this raggedy, crisscrossed area of hard granite and sandy gullies. Very easy, it's like a maze. But the one thing about the maze is that it all leads downhill like water back towards Siberia. So you don't have to go very far before you can just start following any of those little courses, and you'll wind up into a kind of a sandy wash about the width of a single lane that a car could drive in, with steep sides on either side and really very comfortable sand. And if you thought the silence entering the Badlands was acute, wait until you get into that little gully there, and you can literally hear the blood cells in your ears banging, in your eardrum banging into one another. It's that quiet. You can hear blood cells banging into one another. It's unsettling. The little water course you're on will grow slightly larger with each step because you're going downhill, so the water grows, each little channel rivulet, a flash flood, adds to it and it gets bigger. When I came this way, the anxiety I felt up there on Windy Ridge had vanished by this point and was replaced instead with a confidence which grew in proportion to the erosion of the landscape where I now walked. That's interesting that the confidence increased, and I think the reason that the confidence increased at that point was because every step was taking me back towards Siberia. I was, in fact, had reached the high point of the hike and was returning back. I have a good internal compass, so I kind of sense when I'm heading back in the direction of the place I don't want to go. I believe that the cause of this change was the cessation of the wind, which blew hard upon the ridge, unsettling my nerves with a reminder of these fierce natural circumstances and the implicit threat of such solitude and disconnect from the comforting fellowship of my own species. The quiet now of this meandering dry gully hushed my nerves, but perhaps only as much as any illusion of security the mind can invent in dangerous places and can compromise circumstance. Just a moment. Excuse me. So sorry. Now, the next part's important. It would have been very easy for me to just have hot-footed it out of the Badlands, through the Badlands, get my mind in that frame of mind of just go, get out of here. But I did stop, and it was that stopping that was important. Soon your little course will merge into a larger gully with steeper sides and a sandy bottom. How much water and rain were required to make this sand from solid volcanic rock and granite? Was this done during the current epoch of desert, or perhaps during an earlier period of geologic time, when the landscape wasn't desert, and rain fell and flowed here sufficient to produce a perennial stream, with fish and insects and birds, brush, trees, and an entire green ecosystem? So I was imagining the previous environment that had once been here, with all of that lush environment and perennial fresh water. Was this small stream basin carved then from stone by the constant attention of a bursting biome of animate purpose and action? Am I seeing this now in the absence of such seeming purposeful force? In the absence of that, right? The vacuum absence again of all the effort, all the time, all the water flow, all the life that made that environment. It's like a skeleton of a once living landscape. Is this why I can only best comprehend such indifference in the desert? And only after I've wandered far from somewhere into a nowhere, where memory remains visible only upon the face of stones and the piles and swirls of sand. My mind begins to slow and falter here. The Sandman's spell begins with comfort and deep wonder. I mustn't let myself sleep. There's time enough for that after. So now I'm in the hike, I'm beginning to think about things, but then that's being replaced by something else. And I begin to slow my steps, feeling the soft sand under my foot. I'm beginning to delay my return to safety and home. After a short distance, the larger gully will widen and then turn gently to the right. Black Mountain is now near at hand, directly to the southeast. It blocks and protects us from discovery. To the east, west, and north, there's only vast waste and empty. Such vast, wow. This place is nearly as good as you could hope to find for quiet introspection, though you may need to bring such peace with you. I recommend stopping somewhere here in the sand. Take off your pack, lay it aside. Sit down on the sand, pull off your shoes, then your socks. Lay these aside to dry a bit in the still sunny air. Take off your shirt, lay down on the soft sand. Close your eyes now, with your head facing upstream and your feet towards the somewhere where you are headed. Your feet should always face in the direction of your somewhere. Close your eyes and let the sun blaze. Warmth rises now on your exposed limbs. Feel your skin beginning to heat. Does the sand feel good under your back, bottom, and legs? It should be soft and surprisingly comfortable. Let your mind wander. Note how it doesn't wander far. There's anxiety again now as you lay exposed and vulnerable in the wilderness. What danger might come of this? What animal could be watching you now from above the gully? What might come padding or slithering up or down the wash towards us? What small things might now be creeping across the sand in our direction? Did I stay too long out here? Do I have enough water to make it back to Siberia safely? Can I remember the way? I'm already on a path which is not the one I used to get here. Do I have enough time to make it back? Will I die today or tonight out here in the desert? Have I already made some fatal mistake? Note how these thoughts are different from those on Windy Ridge. Was your thinking so practical on the ridge? Looking out at the impossible landscape, feeling and hearing the wind tracing your mortality across some past few decades of your life to this moment, asking yourself how much more to come and what, if anything, might follow. These were the impressions on the ridge, not fear but frightful awe, and an awesome comprehension of irreverence to the lack of any comprehensible meaning, intent, or purpose in the greater scheme of nature. This is the difference between the naked, raw exposure to indifference and the mere fear of being alone someplace far and alien. When you've had your rest at the Sandman's bed, put your shirt and shoes back on. Hoist your pack and continue walking downstream until you spill out into the larger wash. Turn right and up this wash a short distance, maybe a quarter mile, before turning sharply to the left and heading up and over the ridge. Now you cross the Badlands. You might cross here through another couple of washes as you move steadily west. Now is the time to get lost and lose your way to the next stop in the journey. If you do get lost, then don't panic. Just head downstream with the next dry wash you encounter, or go back to the last wash. Following any wash or watercourse now towards the south will eventually take you out into the open desert, where you should be able to regain your orientation. And even if you don't, if you continue south now, you will certainly eventually encounter the railroad and Route 66. But again, don't come here or follow this course unless you can accept the chance that you might make a mistake and find yourself truly lost, with night arriving soon, little water left, and absolutely no idea where to go. This risk is one of the reasons to come. So I'll stop with that for now. So the experience upon the ridge and the experience in the sand gully were quite different. The one on the ridge was the was more akin to fear, the recognition of vulnerability. The one in the sand wash was more a recognition of emptiness, that the universe was indeed mostly as quiet and empty again as that vision on the ridge might have suggested. So the silence of laying down in that sand in the desert, in that wash, with that vacuum pull of emptiness, drawing any sense of security away from me, any sense that of comforting stories that I might have told myself of forever, of a sense denying that through the universe's basically inability to forward anything other than the raw mechanical fact of physics, the push of time and the draw of entropy. It was a sobering experience. And it was the thing that made me realize that coming out into a place like that, to encounter that, was a worthwhile experience. And I wound up putting my pack back on. I got back up off the sand, the hot sand, putting my shoes and socks back on, my clothes, my pack, and head off into the desert. And I came back to my family, determined to not despair, not to take the downward path of nihilism, but to take the upward path and to endeavor to create a life of courage, a life of joy and independence, and to share what I learned along the way. And that's why I wrote Going Alone, and that's why I write The Good Life, and that's why I go out to the desert every 2 weeks on a Friday to sit under a bridge and think, and then share what I find along the way, and I will continue to do so. But most of all, it's why I am a family man, why I am a husband and a father, an employee, a worker, a friend, and I'm not so good on that one still. I still don't have a lot of friends because I think I'm enjoying this time alone so much. I do enjoy my time with my wife. It's just the two of us. We really like it. Emily's more grown now. She's off on her own. But that is the centerpiece of it all. Is the decision to be a social man, a man of my community, a man of my family, a man of my responsibility. And with that, I'm going to sign off. Any comments? No? Cow says 3 smiles. Thank you, Cow. I'm going to sign off for now. I wish you all the best. Remember, goingalone.org is the website that I created to house all of this. You can read Going Alone for free over there, as well as the new book, The Good Life, is there. As I write the book, it just adds in, I add the chapters there as well. Oh wow, Liam, thanks for the £1.99. I'm glad you enjoyed this. I will buy my wife a cup of coffee with that. Thank you very much. Wow. Take care, everybody. Oh, and by the way, if you want a copy of Going Alone, you can buy it on Amazon, but you don't have to. You can just send me an email, softypapa@goingalone.org, and ask me, and I'll autograph a copy and send it to you anywhere in the world. Give me a little time. I'm a little slow on the uptake sometimes, and maybe take about a month before it'll arrive. With that, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody, and I guess take care, be safe and not too safe, and I wish you all the best. Bye-bye.